Thank you all for tuning in to our second Tales from the Trenches webinar. For those who did enter the poll, I love that word hopeful. That's really what this is all about. The Hirschberg Entrepreneurship Institute started about 20 years ago because I had an instinct that has been confirmed hundreds of times since, that most of us learn best through storytelling. We learn from real cases, real people, and real challenging situations, or just hearing from others' experiences. And that's what this webinar series is all about. At the end, we'll tell you about the next one coming up. But today we have a really great treat. My problem nowadays, is the older I get, is I don't try to remember what year something happened anymore. I just try to remember what decade. And Tom, first, I don't know how many decades you and I have been hanging out together, but I remember my first Nantucket Nectars, and it was like a little bit of a religious experience. It was absolutely something that didn't exist out there. I know you'll share that story with us. For everybody else, let me just simply say, Tom and his partner Tom Scott, launched a beautiful little venture against all odds. And since then, and Tom will tell you, he's had many and multiple roles, including as a mentor and advisor to the other moderator today, Ethan Hirschberg, who will be handling the Q&A. Tom came to my Entrepreneurship Institute, probably 15 years ago, and we just had a blast with these great stories. Again, I said it 2 days ago, I'll say it one last time. Anybody who's on this call, anyone who's starting a business, anybody who filled out this poll and is in fact worried but hopeful, or worried, or otherwise just get your hands on the bars, knows that this is a 24/7 kind of undertaking. It takes a certain amount of pathological optimism, and please join me in welcoming a fellow pathological optimist, Tom First. Welcome, Tom. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Tom. There you go.
Am I good now?
You're good.
Thanks, Gary. Good to be here. Appreciate being invited. I was about to mention optimist. I'm accused by everyone that I know that I'm an eternal optimist. And, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are. It's probably one of the characteristics that leads them into their venture in the first place. These are certainly difficult times. I think a lot of people who have started companies have gone through some form of difficult time. I'm not sure anything like what we're going through today, both, personally and emotionally and certainly economically. I just wanted to say that there have been people in my life, and one of the things I discovered early on in business was that, as a kid in my 20s, there were certain people I could pick up the phone and call, and they were just simply helpful. And frankly, Gary was one of the early ones in my life, and people like Jim Cook from Boston Beer Company. It amazed me when I was in my early 20s that I could pick up the phone and they would say, come and have lunch with me and talk. So, over the years, I've tried to do that for other people because I think it's so important. And obviously something like this is just a testament to people who've been through it before, supporting each other, especially at a time like this. And I would also say that as I looked at the panel of people that you've assembled over the next couple of weeks, it is not a mystery to me that there are many of the people that I've met in my life that are just great people and great leaders of other people, and they're honest and have great integrity and have built wonderful businesses and just special people. And I'm not surprised that Gary's the one that brought them together. So thank you for doing this. So anyway, I'll start with the first slide of my deck. I don't know whether maybe it'll come up, but I always laugh because I would say if you were gonna say how to start a juice company, you definitely wouldn't follow my script, because I didn't go out to start a beverage company. I wasn't planning to get into the food business. I frankly wasn't planning to get into business because I knew nothing about a business. I didn't know what a P&L was. Tom and I flunked accounting, at Brown. I mean, thankfully, when you flunk a class at Brown, like you can pretend you never took it and it doesn't show up on your record. So I got a 42 on the midterm and dropped the class. And Tommy got a 56, so he became our financial leader. But this is where we started our business, was on the water in Nantucket. And I think first and foremost, I woke up every morning and loved what I was doing. That boat, the 3 Over, the boat that says All Serve on it, was our store. And we used to get up in the morning and load it up with coffee and New York Times and muffins. And in the afternoon, it was lobster dinners and cherry stones and whatever. We pick up people's we basically do anything as long as people pay us to do it. And I learned to sell on that boat. I memorized, the type of every sailboat in the harbor. I knew the name of it. I knew how big it was, and I knew the people year after year who came in. I'd say, "Hi, Mr. Smith. It's nice to see you again." And I learned about selling on that boat, and I also fell in love with business. I also fell in love with Nantucket, and frankly, Nantucket Nectars was founded because I didn't want to leave the island, and Tommy and I together did not want to leave the island of Nantucket. We were just looking for some way that we could stay in this small community that was really special to us. It was what I think we imagined, growing up in America, years ago, might have been like when towns are small and you knew your postman and you knew the gas guy and whatever, and everyone. It was like a very small, tight community where people cared about each other. So the picture 2 Over from the left is a picture. Basically, our business early on was we did anything we could to make money. We delivered bread. We ran our boat, All Serve. I was a sailor, and one of the things we did is we started delivering boats down south. So people would pay us to sail their boats down south. And this was a trip on the way back from one of our trips, sailing a boat from the Bahamas back to Nantucket, which was a wild ride with those 4 guys. And when I was a senior in college, I had tasted a peach juice in Europe. I'd gone over there to see my girlfriend, and they had juices in Europe that were nothing like what we had in America. And so we were trying to figure out a business on Nantucket that we could do year round, because the boat business would end after the summer. And at some point I said to Tom Scott, I was like, we're doing all these crazy things. We're scallop fishermen in the winter, and we're delivering bread, and we're running the boat in the summer. What if we tried to make this juice and sell it off of our boat in the summer? And the other Tom, just couldn't believe it. He said that was a great idea, which I thought was a terrible idea. He thought it was a great idea. And so on this trip back to Nantucket, we sort of dedicated to ourselves that when we got back, we were going to start a juice business, and we're going to try to make fresh juices and sell them in the morning off the boat on Nantucket Harbor. And we came up with a name in 5 minutes. We lived on Nantucket. It was Nectars in Europe. It was Nantucket Nectars. There was no thought around it other than that. And when we got back to Nantucket, we started making juice in a blender in an ice cream shop on Straight Wharf in Nantucket, and we sold it out on the water in the moorings and called it Nantucket Nectars. Now, this was one of 25 different jobs that we had. I mean, it was still delivering bread, and we were still running our boat service, and we repaired engines. We ran a rescue business for the Coast Guard offshore, where we rescued, sailors and motorboaters that didn't know how to operate their boats. And then we started selling juice. And one thing that happened was, as we were selling to people on the water, everyone always be like, what a great idea. Like, you guys should really mass produce this. And so we decided, look, we're going to try to figure out how to mass produce it. So we're working out of an ice house on the back of Straight Wharf on Nantucket. And I just started calling people to figure out, how do you buy glass, and how do you make labels? Where do I get peach puree? No internet. No cell phones. So I was using the Yellow Pages. I used to, go through the Yellow Pages and call glass companies, and they'd be like, "Oh, we make windshields." And they're like, "Oh, sorry, I'll call someone else." But as I said before, like, I found people that wanted to be helpful. I'd stumble on someone who would tell me where to buy something else. Where do you buy purees? But anyway, to make a long story short, you can go to the next slide. We made our first product, and this is it on the left. So we got into the juice business. After we had handmade it and sold it on the water, we manufactured 1,400 cases in upstate New York and shipped it all back to Nantucket. And that was our original label, which it was a very, attractive label for a specialty store. And we started selling it on stores out in Nantucket. And Tom and I, this was, by the way, this was 1990. Tom and I would put it in the store, and then we'd sit outside of a store and wait for someone to buy it. And when someone bought it, we would sort of run after them and ask them what they thought of it. And, it went pretty well. And I figured we'd have these 1,400 cases until I was like 50 years old. But we actually like forced them into the stores, and on Nantucket, it sold reasonably well. And we battled. On the right, that's actually illustrations from I found these things in the last couple of days, illustrations from the second version of our label, because honestly, like the first packaging didn't really work very well. So we ended up about 6 months later coming out with a second version of our packaging. Over the course of the next, this was in 90, 91, we started getting distribution on the Cape. We had a buddy selling it around Boston College. We started selling a little bit of product down in Washington, D.C., and the other Tom was from Washington, D.C. And we started to learn about the business world. I mean, we didn't know anything about collecting receivables or keeping books or anything. And to be honest with you, we were a total mess. Like it was basically like, as long as we had more money at the end of the day than we had at the beginning of the day, we thought we were doing all right. But actually it was weird because the more we did, the less money we had, which I didn't really understand cash flow, but I thought someone was stealing from us. And I kept saying to Tommy, it's like, we have to be being robbed because we're doing more, but we have less. And so that, that goes back to flunking accounting as a freshman at Brown University. And I never went back and took it again, which may have been a mistake. So we battled. And we ran this business for a couple of years, got some distribution in Boston, got a little bit of distribution on Nantucket. We could make it sell on Nantucket. We could make it sell in Boston. But we were really struggling to get the business going. And I was, I in particular, like really loved the juice business and saw this as an opportunity. And I ended up offering to leave Nantucket, go down to Washington, D.C., and start selling the stuff on my own in Washington, D.C. out of my car, which I didn't want to leave Nantucket because the whole mission of the business in the beginning was to never leave Nantucket. And here I was heading down to D.C. And I went down to D.C. and started just selling out of my car to see what a real market was like and whether we could build a business. And, part of my deal was I would basically have lunch like 7 times to 10 times a day. So, and I would try to become friendly with the store owner. So I'd buy lunch and then I'd sort of strike up a conversation. I'd say, hey, total coincidence that I'm in here having lunch, but, I actually own this juice company and I'd be willing to put a case on the shelf for you for free. And if it sells, you can pay me. If not, no one loses. And then, I'd get it into that store and go have my second lunch of the day and try to do it over again. And, I could get into 5 or 6 or 7 accounts a day that way. And I started selling in DC, and we started to build the business. And at that time there were, we were really fighting against Coke and Pepsi. There was a brand called Elliot's Amazing out there. Snapple had seltzers, but they hadn't made iced tea yet. And there was Soho Soda had come out, but there was basically, this industry, as Gary knows, like it didn't exist. Like I didn't know any humans that made food products. I knew Gary and kind of knew Ben and Jerry, and I knew Jim Cook, but there weren't a lot of people in our industry. So we felt like, look, we're up against A&W Root Beer, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and that's who we're trying to battle. And I'm just going up and down the streets trying to deal with, the fact that Coke owns the whole shelf. And I'll tell you, it was hard. And frankly, we didn't do very well. Now I was going back and forth to DC, trying to figure out, to be honest with you, My parents were wondering what the heck I was doing. You know, they paid for my college. You know, I'd gone to, a decent college in the Northeast, and my mom used to ask me over and over again, "What are you doing again?" And I'd be like, "Oh, we started a juice company." And she's like, "I don't even understand what that means." And she's like, "I thought you were going to be a lawyer." And I was like, I had no interest in being a lawyer. Um, so I'll tell you, I will never forget this day. But I was driving from DC back to Boston, and I went into a convenience store in Delaware. And, I knew this was about 1992. And I walked in, if you're in the beverage industry, I'm sure, I know Gary's like this because Gary once like went into, I used to own a store, and Gary once went into my store in Concord. And he's been in the business for 30 years. Like, I think he had sold his own business at that point. He went into my store, and he didn't like the way that Stonyfield was merchandised in my store. And he was mad at me because I didn't have Stonyfield milk. I had like Horizon or something in there. And I didn't know he was in the store, but I got literally a 3,000 word email from him the next day explaining to me why my store was mismerchandised. So I will tell you, like, if you're in this industry, you can't shop without understanding what's going on the shelf. And I was already there, a couple of years into my business. And I walk into this convenience store in Delaware, and I saw a product the moment I opened the convenience store door across the whole store. And I was like, what in the heck is that product? I've never seen anything like it. And I walked over and I picked up this 24-ounce can, and it was called Arizona Iced Tea. I'd never seen it before. And I was like, this is the greatest packaging I've ever seen in my life. And meanwhile, down in DC, I'd gotten this little distribution company up and going with, I had another guy driving the van at this point, and we were doing the same thing up in Boston. I was like, if we could sell this product, we could make it. We'd have a real business. And so I picked up a payphone, which a lot of the people on this cast probably don't even know what a payphone is, but I picked up a payphone, and I called the other Tom, and I said, I just found the greatest product in the world. It's called Arizona Iced Tea. We have to call these guys and get the distribution rights to this stuff. So if you go to the next slide, so this is this slide is where I want to be. We ended up getting in touch with Don Voltaggio and John Farrellito, who were the founders of Arizona Iced Tea. And, they were two savvy entrepreneur from Brooklyn, New York, basically against two preppy guys from Nantucket. It was not a fair contest. And so we asked them for the rights to Arizona Iced Tea, to distribute Arizona Iced Tea. And, to make a long story short, after like a 3-month interview and a competition with a big distributor in the Boston area, they granted us the rights to Arizona Iced Tea. We had just raised capital from a guy named Mike Egan, who was founder of Alamo Rent-A-Car, who, this was 1992 when we raised money. And the term angel investor I'd never heard it. I don't think it existed. And Mike was an angel. That's who he was. He was an incredible person who had never really invested in another business, had built Alamo from scratch to like $1 billion business, and had really taken on the big players in the car rental industry. And we went and met with him when we were raising money. We'd originally interviewed 25 people. And every one of the 25, we're going to raise, our first idea was to raise $20,000 each from 25 people, which is the stupidest idea in the world. Gary knows all about things like that. And when we met Mike, Mike said, look, I'm not interested in being part of like a 25-person investor group, but I would be interested in investing in the business. And he interviewed us and asked us a ton of questions. And honestly, like, none of the questions at the time had anything to do with the beverage industry, not one. They were all like moral, ethical questions about who we were as people, our relationship with each other, how we treated other people. And when we were done meeting with him, he said, look, I'll just be honest with you. I don't know anything about the beverage industry. I don't even know anything about consumer products. He said, but I would invest in you guys. And I want to let you know, I'd just be investing in you two because I believe in you guys. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, wow, that is like a incredibly flattering, first of all, but frightening that this guy's going to put, he offered to invest $500,000 into the business at the time. And he put in $500,000 and he did it because he believed in us. And my feeling at that time was I wanted to prove Mike right. So going on back to Arizona Iced Tea, when we discovered Arizona, we went back to Mike and said, hey, look, we have this unbelievable opportunity to distribute Arizona Iced Tea. And this is going to transform our business. And frankly, I will tell you, from a business perspective, what I believed at the time was that distribution was our answer. Is that we had this juice product that we had created. We knew how to get it to the shelf. We needed to get it to more shelves, and we needed, more power. And maybe Arizona could provide us with that power. My understanding of beverages was fight for the shelf, and somehow we'll win. And so Egan ended up putting in $2 million more. He got half of the company, and we had now taken in $2.5 million, and we got the rights to Arizona Iced Tea, to distribute Arizona Iced Tea in all of the Northeast, in Metro Boston, Cape and Islands, out to 495, and all the Washington metropolitan area. And I will tell you, in the first, we ended up getting 27 trucks in Boston that we leased. We had 11 trucks down in DC. We hired 110 people in Boston and like 30 people in DC in a matter of like 3 months, because we committed to the guys at Arizona that we were going to do this. And in the first 12 months that we were distributing Arizona Iced Tea, we sold 1 million cases between the two markets. Honestly, to this day, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, maybe Halo Top grew as quickly as Arizona Iced Tea did, but I haven't seen anything like it in my life. We would take in trailers of Arizona, and we wouldn't put the product in the warehouse. We would back our trucks up to the trailers, put a plate between them, and just take the pallet jack and just load it right onto the truck. Because we couldn't afford to take the time to put it in the warehouse. The stuff was selling so fast. It was an incredible experience. I used to walk into stores and I would literally put a can on the counter, look at the retailer and say, how many do you want? And the guy like, I'll take 10 cases. And I was like, all right, I'll be back in a week with 20. I guarantee you. That's how it went. And so now we've got all our salesmen, our distribution company was called Tom and Tom Distribution, out there selling Arizona Iced Tea. And they would come back at the end of the day and they'd have their sales sheets and they'd be like, all right, I sold 260 cases of Arizona Iced Tea and I sold 7 cases of Nantucket Nectars. I'd be like, you asshole. I'd be like, I was so mad. I was like, I'm signing the checks and all you guys do is sell Arizona Iced Tea. It drove me nuts. I couldn't figure it out. And I mean, it was amazing because I thought we were making lots of money. We hired a CFO. We were a financial mess. I mean, literally this distribution experience, if anything could have gone wrong, it went wrong. Trucks crashing, inventory disappearing, people quitting. We had a guy quit, a driver quit on a 95-degree day on Route 128 at 10 a.m. So he had a full truck of Nantucket Nectars in Arizona with Tom and Tom on the side of it. He pulled it over with the engine running, left the keys in it on the side of 128 and quit. Like someone must have picked him up. And we got a call from the state police and they're like, you got a truck running on the side of the road with abandoned. We had a driver back into a Dunkin' Donuts sign. The sign went over, hit 2 cars. I mean, it was like a daily occurrence trying to find out what would happen bad the next day. In 14 months, we lost $2.3 million, which our financials were so bad, it probably took us another 5 months to even figure that out. And we ended up, realizing we were in financial trouble and had to go down and meet with Mike Egan, our angel, who truly is a wonderful guy and believed in us, was so excited to be part of this business. And we went down and we presented him with this deck, a board deck that was like this thick, and our CFO had prepared it. And it was a great deck. It was about how we were going to reinvent Nantucket Nectars to make it sell as well as the Arizona iced tea. And then we inserted like one page in the middle of it, of the deck, that said, by the way, we lost all the money that you put into the company. And before the meeting even started, and we distributed the decks at the board meeting, Egan, in his typical fashion, opened up the deck right to the worst page, the page that said we lost all the money. And we never looked at any other page. It was typical Egan too. Like, he was just leafing through the deck, and basically he told us that in that board meeting, look, you guys have to figure out how to turn this thing around. And I'll give you 6 months and I'll support you for 6 months. But if we can't turn it around, we'll have to close down the company. And so over the course of the next 6 months, we had to sell the distribution company, both in DC and Boston. It was our only way out. And we were lucky. We found someone to buy the distribution company from us in Boston, which was United Liquor. They wanted Arizona iced tea. I mean, everyone wanted Arizona iced tea. And it took us a little longer to find someone to buy the DC distribution company. I will tell you, one of the things that we did when we sold our distribution company, we leveraged, I won't get into the details, but we knew they wanted Arizona iced tea, but we made them make commitments to helping us build Nantucket Nectars. And that was a big ingredient in helping springboard us once we stopped being distributors. And I was petrified of losing control over distributing our brand, because I believed, as I said earlier, distribution was the answer. If I could control the shelf, I could build a great brand. But there was a problem with that. It actually wasn't working very well, because, when we were dealing with even my own salesmen, they wanted to sell Arizona. They didn't want to sell Nantucket Nectars. So here I was, like, working my tail off on Nantucket Nectars. And my product itself was like only doing this much work. But I was doing this much work. And then the Arizona iced tea guys, like, those guys were doing no work. We never saw anyone from Arizona iced tea. But that product, their packaging, that can, their bottle, it was magic what it did on the shelf. And so at some point, Tommy and I got together and said, we've got to fix this dynamic, because distribution is part of the answer, but it's not the answer. Like, we need distribution, but if our product and our brand isn't working as well as it can for us, we're never going to be Arizona iced tea. And we decided to hire a real packaging firm, which we had never done before. And we decided to look, like, inside and outside our product, like, truly tear it apart to figure out how to get closer to what Arizona iced tea was doing. What were our ingredients? We were using high fructose corn syrup back then. And frankly, everyone in the industry, in the beverage industry, that added sugar, everyone uses high fructose corn syrup. Every plant that we went to had a silo of high fructose corn syrup. And I know this because the only way we could use cane sugar is we brought in bags of cane sugar when we started. And we had to convince people to properly mix and into solution cane sugar, because they had never done it before. There were plants that refused to do it at the time. And I know it sounds crazy now, because no one wants to add sugar to anyone. But back then, using cane sugar instead of using fructose was a big deal. And we were using a higher juice percentage as well. And so we took our product from top to bottom, reformulated, redid our labels. And I will tell you that we built our packaging and our labels in the likeness of ourselves. we worked really hard to figure out who we were, the story behind us building the company in Nantucket, and just telling that story. And one of the things I truly believe about marketing, marketing is actually quite simple when it's honest and when you're just telling a true story. And once we found that in our packaging and and frankly in ourselves, almost everything we did in terms of branding ourselves, packaging ourselves, making our product, selling it, and marketing it actually became really easy. And honestly, it had been really difficult before that. So if you go on to the next slide, this is in many ways, some of it is not, work that I did because, like some of the bottles are what Cadbury or Dr. Pepper Snapple has done to the brand now, which you probably wouldn't notice, but I would criticize little things. Every element of our packaging that we ever did was illustrated by hand. Every label was actually every letter was hand illustrated individually on every label that we ever created, from top to bottom. And the scenery was painted from real scenes. Fruits were painted from real fruit. And they were all really and truly Nantucket, and they were stories about our business and the people that worked with us and our friends and associates and people that had helped us when times were tough when we were younger. One of the things that we did is we started doing radio advertising. I think we started in 1995. Again, going back to people helping people, we used to hear Jim Cook on the radio, Sam Adams. His voice was on all the time. Like if you lived in New England, it was borderline annoying. The best beer in America, 40 times over, won the gold. Like he had this nasally voice, and we were like thinking about doing radio. You're like, oh, we should call Jim because he knows about radio. And typical Jim, let's go out to lunch next day. And Jim says, you guys should try it. It's the only thing. It's the first thing where you will spend money on something and you'll get nothing back right away. Like not going to send you caps. They won't send you labels. You don't get glass, and you're going to have to hope it works.
Tom, let's go 2 more minutes, and then because
Okay.
we've got a bunch of questions for you.
Yep, great. And anyway, we started doing radio ads. We made our own radio ads. We cut them ourselves. And we ended up being a company that did $7 million of radio a year, totally handmade, won the Mercury Awards for best radio ads in America a bunch of times at a time when people weren't making their own ads. And the reason I tell the story was, it was again about being authentic, because all we did when we got on the radio was we'd talk about, we make the best lemonade you can buy in a bottle. And what we felt was that put pressure on us to make the best possible lemonade we could in the bottle. And otherwise we would have had to go on the radio and say, we make mediocre lemonade. Well, there's no way we were going to do that. And so we had to make really good lemonade. So great marketing, telling an honest story, and then backing it up with the product in your bottle allows everything to work together. And that goes to how you hire people and how you build your company.
So, sorry.
No, I was going to say if you just go to the last slide, we could just leave it here. Or actually, one more slide on that. This is sort of the days of getting going. This is something, just the last little bit here. We wrote this in 1994. It was called our Juice Guide Credo. And we spent a lot of time doing this, and it embodied, honestly, what we were trying to build, where every element of our business was important to us. And without each piece of them, we could never be the company that we wanted. It certainly started with product, but it was the product outside, it was the packaging, it was our people, it was our respect for the community. And it's just funny, I looked at this for the first time in a long time, but we wrote this in 1994. And I and I know a lot of companies do this today, and I will tell you, these are really important things. And I forgot how important this was to us back in the day. Um, but that's really where a lot of your dedication and your understanding of who you are as a company and as a brand begins.
Cool. Thank you, Tom. And sorry you had to relive some of that. We do have a bunch of questions. I guess first question from me, is there a lesson here throughout the distribution foray? Obviously, that was a complicated process. Is there a lesson here just about refocusing on your own brand that really made the difference for you after you guys were able to spin off the distribution side?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is that I meet a lot of founders and see a lot of brands that are struggling in certain areas where they find selling difficult, or competing on the shelf difficult, or telling their story or their marketing is difficult. Um, and I think we felt the same way. There were a lot of things where I looked at other companies, maybe either in our category or brands on the shelf, where I thought they had it easier than we did. And I will tell you, until we really understood who we were, and when our packaging really spoke to what our brand was, and what was the outside of the bottle felt like what was in the bottle, and it felt like all the team members behind it, all of a sudden selling got easy, and telling our story got easy, and working with our distributors got easier. And it wasn't a coincidence. So what I would say to people is, sometimes when things are really hard, you actually need to take a step back and understand why. It's not just that the distributor sucks, or the salesman won't do the job, or that retailer's an idiot. A lot of times it's that you're not quite there with your brand, and taking a step back and getting that right will make a lot of parts of your business easier, collecting money easier. It'll make everything easier.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of that too is
Oops. I think I lost you.
You back?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you
Yep,
went.
we hear you now.
Sorry, yeah, I was just asking if you could touch on the importance of your investor in the long run of the business, and how you take lessons from that in your own investing.
I mean, Mike was a hands-off guy. He invested in Tommy and me. He wanted us to run the business. You know, he wasn't a venture capitalist. He wasn't a private equity firm. So I never had that experience with Nantucket Nectars. But he was a real businessman. And I would tell you, the biggest thing that I remember about Mike was that he thought big. He didn't invest in our business for it to be, a nice little $15 million, $20 million business. He thought we were going to be, 100 million or more, which we ultimately got to. But I think that's important, and that is a step in whether it's through VC money or private equity firm, or you're going out and finding a bunch of individuals to invest in your business. You hopefully have a group of people that are investing because they believe this is a business that has a real opportunity to make an impact in its category and become something important. And I think entrepreneurs need that sometimes. And it had a big impact on me, where I was like, wow, this guy, he's run a big business. He really believes in our future. I think he knows how to get there. And even though he wasn't a beverage guy, he gave me the confidence to start to build a real business. And so, yeah, I mean, and I will tell you, like, the most important thing, absolutely the most important thing, Mike is just a wonderful human being. And I didn't fully know that the day we closed the deal. I will tell you, like, I read the contract. I never read a purchase agreement before in my life. And I'm someone who, like, I read everything. And Tommy's dad was an attorney. And I read the purchase agreement and I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever read in my life. It's awful. And I remember I called Mr. Scott on the phone and I said, have you read this agreement? It's terrible. And he said, yeah, I read it. He said, Tom, I'll tell you what, if Mike's a good guy, it's a great agreement. And if he's a bad guy, it's a terrible agreement. And that's true. I mean, look, the agreements, there are variations, there are different, negotiations that you can win or lose when you're dealing with some of these agreements. Ultimately, it's all about the person. Yeah, you might end up pulling that agreement out, very rarely, but if someone wants to get in a battle with you, they're going to make your life miserable. So work with great people.
Yeah, and it sounds like his confidence in you is almost a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that you were able to gain some confidence just from him.
Absolutely. And I think as founders and as entrepreneurs, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call have felt this, like, that's an important part of, like, keeping it going, especially when you go through times, because there are those days where stuff works, or you're making progress, or you have your win, and it makes you want to get up the next day and keep going, and having people that inspire you to feel good about yourself and that are supporting you is very important.
Yeah. So I would love to move to some audience Q&A. You have a lot rolling in. Does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I guess going back to the beginning, Ronald asked why you chose Washington, D.C. to test the marketplace.
For two reasons. One is because Tom Scott grew up in DC and his brother lived there, so I could live in his house for free. And number two, it was a warmer market than New England, had a longer season, and it was a really good beverage market. It had, independent channel. So it had cafes and independent grocery stores and stuff like that. It was just demographically a very, and always has been, a very good beverage market. And I thought that at the time. When I got down there, I realized it was true. I mean, honestly, what I started doing, and later you couldn't do this, I'd just walk into the US Senate or the House and into the cafeteria, and they, wheel in 50 cases tomorrow. NIH, who wants to talk about NIH right now? But I got into NIH, and it was like 120 cases a week at NIH. So I mean, hopefully Dr. Fauci was drinking it, back then.
All right. And Kay asked, what type of grassroots marketing do you find most effective?
I think times have changed, and I'm not out there on the streets now like I used to be. We used to always use this term, market to people's taste buds first in the food industry. And for us, like, I think founders can fool themselves into believing their product is there or great, because you have an idea and you're creating something because you have a concept. And sometimes, like, even though you love it and it's theoretically like a concept, until you are rubber meets the road and you can understand how consumers are really honestly reacting to it, I think it's hard to know whether you have something real. So we were entirely dedicated to samplings, and not just sampling, but like truly interacting with consumers to get feedback. There wasn't a lot of data that time. We used to make fun of data early on. I don't anymore, because I think the data is much more valuable today than it used to be. But absolutely putting product in the food industry in people's mouth. And I will tell you one thing. When we weren't pushovers, but when people criticized our product or gave us feedback, we took it seriously. we didn't say, oh, these people are idiots. Like they don't know what we know about the juice industry because we're the juice guys. We took it seriously. I mean, and we wanted our product to be great. And we had something in the business we called the Quality Juice Evolution Solution. And we met as a company once a quarter, and one person from the company, we would have proposals, and people could bring to us something about the company or the brand or the product that should be fixed. And we would spend the entire day debating how to fix that issue. And so we did this once a quarter, and the idea was like, we're never going to be good enough. Like, we have to be better. Let's have people in our company like basically create this forum for us to find things that we have to work on. And honestly, in the old days, we used to make lemonade with concentrated lemon juice, and we ended up switching to tankers of NFC lemon juice because, and originally we weren't going to do it because it was so expensive. And we forced ourselves to figure out a way to economically make it happen, even though our belief was that's not possible. And it came out of our Quality Juice Evolution Solution meetings.
Yeah, and it's got to be a process of constant iteration, and ultimately the consumer is the one who's going to be the judge and jury, I suppose.
Yep. Oh, you're gone again.
Let's see, Ethan, you can hear me, Tom, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, are you back, Ethan? Okay, he's got a little internet problem there.
Sorry, guys.
So, go for it, Ethan.
Yeah, I'm. If I cut out, it's a little internet problem.
Yeah.
So Peter asked, Ocean Spray purchased an 80% stake in Nantucket Nectars in 1997. Did you sell too early?
So in I think it was 98 though. In 98, Ocean Spray bought 80%. They took Egan out, and Tommy and I rolled over part of our stake. It was a very complicated deal. We were looking for a strategic partner to get to the next level. We wanted to try to attract the grocery business. And we needed scale in manufacturing, and we didn't know grocery. And we thought it was a great deal, actually. So we were about 40 million in revenue at the time. And in the next 2 years, we basically went from 40 to 80 million in 2 years, our first 2 years with Ocean Spray. And we crushed it. And the cranberry market crashed 2 years later, literally completely fell apart. And the growers were devastated. And then all of a sudden they look back and like, why do we own this Nantucket Nectar company? They have one cranberry flavor. And the job of Ocean Spray is to move cranberries. And I loved the guys at Ocean Spray. It was they were Massachusetts company. They were Patriots fans like I was. It was a co-op. It was a cultural fit. In hindsight, it wasn't a great strategic decision. I can't go back in time and say that it was too early. And I will tell you, we ultimately sold the whole company in 2002 to it was at the time as Cadbury Schweppes, and is now Dr. Pepper Snapple. And I will tell you, in 2002, one of the reasons I was open to selling the company is I was concerned about sugar, which is amazing to me because, I talk to our distributors today, and they're like, there's an inverse correlation between sugar and products and sales, in my portfolio. And Tommy and I were both thinking about it in 2002, and it was a lot. Again, we were still out there on the road sampling. We would hear from people like, wow, a lot of calories. And so look, I think we could have built a bigger company. I don't like all the things that were done to our brand since we sold it and lost control. And it might have been a little bit early, but look, I've had great experiences since then. And the Nectar ride was something that was just a 1 in a million. So I don't have any regrets.
Yeah. So this question is a little bit more for Tom, the investor. But I think there's a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, at least there were on our webinar on Tuesday. So Dan asked, is the criteria for fundraising in CPG radically different now than it was a month ago? Thank you for being.
So you went out again, but can people hear me? Yeah. So I was talking to someone about this today, and I think my feeling as an investor is that there are going to be some great opportunities in a couple months. There may be some great opportunities right now. I'm sure there are some unbelievable opportunities right now, and there are going to be great opportunities over the next several months. I would say the biggest challenge for me as an investor is being able to look at someone's business plan and believe it, and then be able to go to my investors and say, this is real, and this is what the place is going to look like, and this is what, groceries highly disrupted right now. The supply chain is a mess. We have companies where we're completely out of stock in stores, and UNFI won't even pick up an order from us, and they won't deliver it, and we can't get merchandised on the shelf. We have other companies that they're having fewer problems. So I do think that for most companies, there's a disruption over the course of the next 90 days or so until things settle down. And I think more than anything, the supply chain cleans up. But I will tell you, and I've been, went through the 90s crash, went through 9/11, and this is a tough one. The food business is a great business to be in. And through every stage, and what's absolutely remarkable over the last 20 whatever years that I've been in this is how our industry has changed. I started off saying, I was out there fighting Coke and Pepsi, and I would go to corporate cafeterias, there'd be Coke on every table, God, we're never going to win this war. And it's people on this call, and I think Gary was the first one that ever told me to go to Expo West. It was under a tent or something. This industry we are changing the food industry. These companies are truly changing the way Americans see food and around the world. And that's not going to be slowed down by this crisis, and it's disrupted for a couple months. But it was great to see that poll where most people are optimistic, and get ourselves through the next 90 days. And I think there's going to be a lot of money out there available to businesses.
Yeah, and so there's sort of a follow-up to that. I think it's on everyone's mind. It's sort of the reason we're here. Nicholas just asked, if you were building Nantucket Nectars in these COVID moments and you were in your early years, what would you do as an entrepreneur?
I would buckle down, probably. If I knew it was going to be tough I wouldn't want to be raising money where, someone had a gun to my head. You especially when you've got a good business, and I had confidence in my business. I'd want to, I think I'm telling a lot of my businesses right now is, be smart, preserve cash, execute as well as you can in the channels of trade where you can execute today. Manage your cash well, protect your team, be sensible, and we're going to be in a different place in 90 days.
Right.
Tom, just a corollary, one of the folks was asking about your radio campaign, which you obviously invested in, right? It didn't come out of proceeds. But put yourself now, and there's a couple hundred people on here. Would you do radio right now when you talk about conserving cash? Did it work enough that it was really worth an allocation, or is it in the belt tightening? Would you hold off from that? Just given your own experience. I know it was a different time, but
what I'm telling my businesses today is that the supply chain in general is so disrupted that I don't think it makes sense to spend sort of traditional marketing dollars. I do think there are companies out there where, one of the things that has happened is that digital is now actually affordable. Customer acquisition costs 6 weeks ago were ridiculous. Anyone who was spending money on digital probably couldn't do math. No offense to anyone, but now customer acquisition costs for companies that are, either digitally native or have a sizable direct to consumer business can acquire customers efficiently. So I would say that if you can acquire customers and it's efficient for you to grow that business, look at it closely. But traditional forms of media driving people into, retail, that's a tough environment right now from an execution standpoint. So I wouldn't want to be spending money to drive someone into a store to get a shelf where the flavor they want or the product they want isn't in stock. I'd be waiting. I think it's going to settle out. I think it's going to take a little while.
So a corollary question that also, I think, to Ethan's point, is really relevant to a lot of folks this second. Kay asked, what are ways around difficult distributors? And obviously, you had your share of them, but in a different time. But now, to your exact point, the distributors are squeezed. The whole thing is tight. People are worried about their employees showing up to work. The retailers are screaming to keep product going through. Any pointers for folks dealing with distributors?
Here's I was a distributor. I drove the truck. I had the warehouse. I had the retailers that didn't pay their bills. I had the people quit. I knocked the signs down onto other people's cars. It's a tough business. And when I was no longer a distributor, I told my sales guys, we're going to be the most distributor-friendly supplier that a distributor's ever met because we understand their business. And the reality is, those guys are out there to make money, and a salesman is out there to make money. And early on with Nantucket Nectars, I used to tell all our guys, like, look, the commission they're making on our product, doesn't buy this guy a pair of socks in a month. And I was like, and Snapple's out there, they're paying the guy's mortgage or the woman's mortgage. And so until we are making a distributor money, it's very hard for us to get what we want or lean on them. So we worked very hard to lead our distributor to a point where they were making money off our brand, at which point we could exert more force. But it really is, if you can help, it isn't about you. It's about the retailer, and it's about the distributor, and it's about that sales rep. And if you can help them make money, and if you can make their store a better place or their distributor a better business, then they're going to work with you. And until then, it's tough because someone else is buttering their bread. And so I used to tell my sales guys, if you've got a distributor that's selling under 1,000 cases a month, don't complain about them. Don't come and complain to me. I don't want to hear about it. When you're selling over 1,000 cases a month or 1,500 cases a month and they're not doing the job, give me a call and I'll yell at them. So, because at that point they're making money and they're not doing the job, that made me mad.
So I want to ask both of you a question, Ethan, you as well. So Tom is started 30 years ago, actually, it turns out. And Ethan started a business just a few years ago. And Anna here is asking, how can natural brands, and by implication with tougher margins, best drive trial? I'm curious what you both would say to Anna and others interested.
I didn't see that question. Tom, you want to field that or me?
Go ahead, you go first.
I want to hear you both.
Well, for us, at least, I know we're all in this 90-day window together. For us, this has actually been a great time to drive trial. And that obviously it depends on the circumstances and what products your brand offers. But I think just being nimble and really leaning in marketing efforts on your products that have the most relevance to the time. So for us, it's our immunity and wellness items. And we've been driving a ton of trial. Obviously, like Tom mentioned, the cost of acquisition is down, but that does happen, and there are gaps. And so you really have to kind of jump on those and take advantage when you can. So we've instituted really quickly and nimbly a couple of great kind of free sample options on our website and things like that. And so, we're really trying to use relevance to drive trial.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, digital is for the right brands at a time like right now. There's real opportunity, and we're seeing stuff where the the opportunity looks different today than it did 6 weeks ago. Um, and I will tell you, like, direct to consumer is going to become a very important channel, and home delivery is going to become a very important channel. So I think it's an important question about how are you going to, not only in this environment but going forward, as I was saying before, get product in people's mouths, because that's really where people discover and fall in love with a brand. And I remember, like, early on when we would do samplings or be at events, my wife used to tell me a story of the first time she ever tried Stonyfield, and it was at an event. And she said she, like, just because they were there and she tried it there, that's what, like, every time she went in, she bought the brand because she had had this personal experience with the brand. Um, I'm an investor in a brand called 88 Acres, which we make. It all of our products are made with seeds, and they do, like, one-off, like, specialty flavors that they get out and they get it in people's hands, and you can't get it for short periods of time. And there are creative ways, and through digital means and through delivery, where you can create an experience for someone, which is, that's sort of the modern experience of Kristen trying Stonyfield for the first time, however many years ago.
Yeah. So I want to just ask you both one more question, and then I think we'll go to a wrap up. And this is an opportunity to self-promote here, Ethan, but more broadly, Michelle asked, what beverage trends excite you both today?
I never self-promote. I don't know what you're talking about. Tom, go ahead with that one.
I'm going to make a very general comment, but I would say that I think that bubbles have for a long time been kind of the holy grail in sort of ready to drink beverages. And people love bubbles, and I think that kombucha was a beginning of reinventing bubbles for people, and it's hit like a part of the market. And I think that is going to be a lot of innovation in bubbly, sparkling drinks over the next however many years, which are going to continue to erode away traditional carbonated soft drinks. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space.
Yeah, no, and just I agree, but also just people adding on more creative, low and no sugar options is really, I mean, Tom mentioned kombucha, but then kombucha pretty quickly ran into the issue of actually having too much sugar. And so I think we've seen a few brands pop up and get funding even over the last few months in the beverage space that are doing a really great job of improving that even further. And for a while, kombucha was just sort of the less sugar bubbly drink that you would have instead of soda. And now there's sort of the next evolution of those happening. And if you can layer on functional benefits and get it in the cold case, then I think you're hitting everything.
Yep.
Hey, breaking last minute question here. Jeff asked, before the virus, online sales accounted for around 6 to 8% of total grocery with the rest of the store compared to the rest of the store. What does that balance look like post this current crisis? What do you guys, I mean, obviously it's crystal balling, but any sense?
So wait, is he saying 6 to 8%? So online meaning Amazon and direct to consumer for grocery products?
Correct. He said, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Pre-order or online. Yep. You guys see it growing as a
Absolutely.
percent?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, like, my younger friends were already getting more urban, people living more urban were getting home delivery anyway and loving it. And now you've got people out in the suburbs. I see it here, like, everyone's getting stuff delivered, and I think very few of them are going to go back 100% anyway. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it triples.
Yeah, I'm with Tom. I think this is for all the entrepreneurs, this is sort of a fun time to play with just predictive consumer behavior patterns. But I mean, you talked about gaining trial, and I talked about it during this period. A lot of people are trying new things right now. They're trying at-home workouts, or they're trying, grocery delivery. And a lot of those people, to Tom's point, they're not going to go back once they realize the convenience of some of these things. Why go to the grocery store for 3-4 times a week if you don't have to? And I think, thinking about gaining trial on some of those channels, that's what people are doing right now. And they're going to find that it's working for them.
Yeah. Or they're trying fat biking.
Yeah. Hey, we can all do that. So, Tom, last entrepreneur, a wonderful young entrepreneur who I know is Emily's. How did you choose your first non-Tom hire?
So, I'll take you beyond the first non-Tom. There was a third person involved in the beginning that was driving one of the boats, Larry, who was a friend of Tommy's, who went to high school with Tommy. But our first hire, the first outside, was a guy named Ned Desmond. And he had been a professional hockey player, had gotten injured, and then had a financial job and hated it. And ironically, he had traded clearly Canadian stock and made $20,000 in his financial job. And he called us up. We had known him because through friends, he went to high school with one of our friends. And he said to us, I just made $20,000 trading clearly Canadian stock. I will work for you guys for free until I run out of money. And we were like, you're hired. And he stretched it for like a year and a half. and he
love guys like that.
He just beat the pavement and drove the van and was one of the hardest working guys you've ever met in your life. And that's where we learned to fight on the streets with Ned.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I want to thank you both. Ethan, thanks for the great Q&A, and
sorry about
Tom. No. And Tom, obviously, wonderful to be with you again. Let me try to summarize for the folks here. I heard a couple of key insights. I heard my old, if you don't ask, you don't get. You all heard that in Tom's early going there, whether it was going to boat owners or investors. I heard know what you know and know what you don't know. He didn't know accounting, and I heard persistence. I heard that everyone in the company is in sales. Something that I think we all need to remember. Whatever your job, we all work for the consumer. I heard a key insight, which is distribution is the answer. And obviously, Tom you've had experience on both sides of that. You were one, and then you realized that wasn't the answer, but you needed them, and you needed to get to that store. And I heard, and this was also a response to a lot of the questions that here that. It's about putting yourself in the shoes of your distributor, recognizing, you've got to be a meaningful percent of that paycheck. And that's, I think, really important. Sometimes we think of these folks as the enemy, but they're just trying to make a buck too. I heard again and again the personal touch, the importance of the personal touch, the authenticity, the demos, the labels, hand-done labels, and even the radio. And I remember those radio ads, and they were charming. They stuck out. And then I heard set bold goals, and I love that last anecdote. The lemon juice is so wonderful. It's something that seemed impossible, but you knew it was margin-wise, but it was a better product. And so again, I think, especially in times like this, setting bold goals is critical. So again, thank you both. Julie and Carlene, thank you also for putting on yet another wonderful webinar. Folks, on Tuesday, yes, thank you, Carlene. Nicole Dawes, who with her husband Peter were the founder and Nicole was the founder and former CEO of Late July, and now they have a wonderful little beverage company called Nixie. You should know also that Nicole, the world that Tom and I started our business in New England, Nicole's dad was the founder of Cape Cod Chips. So she was Steve Bernard used to go to the same shows Tom and I did, and that's actually how I met Nicole. So she's going to be on Tuesday. You can see the rest of the schedule here. And we have a variety of folks coming up. And again, Ethan will be joining us to help as well. In fact, Nicole's an investor in Ethan's company. So it's a chance for Ethan for you to get some questions back at her.
Yeah, things could get interesting.
Yes. And then if I could, Caroline, if you could just go to that last slide. I just want to remind everybody, we do have our 2-day Entrepreneurship Institute. And if you like what you heard today, and particularly if you have your own questions, your own cases, your own either needs for capital or desire to talk about what kind of financing strategy is best for you, how do you meet your angel? How do you present yourself to them? How do you position your brand, especially in this very dynamic time with e-com coming on so strong? Come to the Institute. You'll enjoy it. When I say come, it'll be online. But it's in particular, submit a case. That's this whole thing is about the kind of stories that you've had a chance to hear today and on Tuesday, and you'll hear over the rest of the month. So again, Tom, Ethan, thank you. Thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and stay safe out there. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.